off the cuff, and here we go. Another podcast episode at The Wealthy Ironworker. Now, I was having a conversation with somebody just the other day, and that's the catalyst for this podcast episode. But in the back and forth dialogue, and of course in the past, all the previous, encounters and interactions I've had with a lot of younger people, apprentices and the like that come into the trade. One of the things that I have, it's a little bit difficult, I think, getting the point across, is that we routinely believe that success comes in these bigger ticket items. It's these big chunks. I made this one right decision and everything came from that, and so I'm looking then, if you will, at all of the big ticket things that I might need to do. And when you look back at some of the podcast episodes or even some of the website articles, we start talking about the milestone theory. It's a really good theory if you don't know what that is. Effectively, the milestone theory is, when you're younger, right, you have all these milestones, if you will, that you routinely just pass. And you always got something else to look forward to. And so time goes slower then, right? You recall back to when you were younger and think, well, time just so slow. When am I going to turn 10? When am I going to turn 13? And then you get to be about mid-20s and it just starts to take off on you in speed. And in that, in that podcast episode, and indeed on the website, one of the things that we talk about is to use goals. When you're setting goals, what you're effectively doing then is kind of creating milestones, things for you to look for, like mileposts on a road that you can, anticipation, right? Anticipation is almost just as good as the actual event itself. And so you have that anticipation of looking forward to something. Well, very much in lockstep with that, keep that in the back of your mind for a second. Very much like that, the idea that these big ticket decisions, that's what people would, kind of connect the dots. But that's not the reality. That's not the reality at all, actually. The truth is that it's a principle that I'm going to name today, and I'm going to begin to articulate it to you so that you can mull it over and listen and believe what I'm telling you, so that going forward, you can begin to either A, correct course, B, change your trajectory, or C, begin to gather all this stuff up so that you can plot your own course. You can be cognizant, thoughtful about this actual principle. And this principle is called the Principle of Microe Decisions. Now, it's a sneaky principle, primarily because most people live life on autopilot. And you know what I mean. When we start talking, as a quick reference to the milestone theory, right? I said over and over again, most people don't set goals. And that's true. It's just a reality. Instead of grabbing life by the horns, if you will, life is just something that happens to them. They're just along for the ride. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with that. If you're in a specific period, you got something going on. But I don't believe that it's a way that we should approach life itself. In fact, I think it's a piss poor way to do it. I think that we miss out on so much when we're not actively, and this is the word of the day, intentionally plotting a course and planning to do what we know we need to do to achieve the best results, right? Most people, when they get older, they look back at all of the years that are behind them and they think about all of the wasted opportunities and all of the wasted things they never got to do and all the wasted time that they spent. Remember, time is the most precious commodity you have. But when it comes to the principle of micro decisions, it's just like goals in that most people don't think it through. They don't pay it any attention. They don't pay it any mind. Now, the principle of micro decisions is effectively this. It is not the big things that you do or the big choices that you make or the big ticket spending items. It can apply in financial. It can apply in the physical, right? It can apply in the spiritual. It has blanket applicability. But effectively, what it means is it's not these big ticket items that most people put their focus on. It's in the small, everyday decisions that you make. You're establishing patterns. You're establishing discipline. You're establishing consistency. And this is what most people miss. Most people, when you look back over, let's say, a 10 or a 20-year period, can look back and have a very difficult time recalling the very small or micro decisions, like I've termed it. But they can recall all of the big ticket or the big things that they've done. I've changed a job, or we bought this, or we decided to do this instead, or whatever. They remember those. But what happens is that they don't remember the smaller things that those decisions that we make on a consistent daily basis that lead us up to those big ticket things. For example, and we'll try to, kind of toss some examples out there. I know that this is going to be one of those podcast episodes that I know that there's a tremendous number of people that could benefit from it. So I'm going to try and give out examples that, will help connect the dots, if you will. So first up, let's talk about finances. I'll just toss it out there at first. If you have not yet, you can go over to the website. There is a 9-part budgeting series. It's article form, and it helps you out tremendously. Most people in the trades, as long as I've been around, have a very difficult time managing their money. So what the principle of micro decisions effectively says is, it isn't, again, like it's not the big ticket items, it's the everyday thing. So it's budgeting, right? So in finances, it's, okay, I am going to be intentional and diligent about how I spend my money. Meaning, if I go to the convenience store in the morning time and I decide, okay, I'm going to get a drink and a snack or whatever, and I'm going to spend $6 at the store. Well, if you've broken a 20, you already know what I'm going to say if you pay in cash. The rest of the money just goes away with a quickness too. However, if you adopted the principle of micro decisions and instead said, you know what, I actually want to take a vacation. And instead of that morning coffee at the convenience store and that snack or whatever, maybe instead I'll just make coffee at my house. And, I might have to get up a couple minutes earlier, but I'll make coffee at my house, and I'll take that money that I have been spending on that coffee at the store, whether it's Starbucks or a convenience store or whatever. And let's say it's $2 every morning. And we do this every day. Well, I'm making then, that's just one. It's just one small micro decision that I am making that has long-term, real-world, positive ramifications down the line. And that's just one micro decision. What if, after 6 months of doing this, how much money do you have now specifically set aside to begin planning that, dream vacation or whatever, right? Or maybe it's a dream purchase. It could be a smaller purchase, whatever. But this is just one micro example. Maybe the micro example is, and again, we're sticking with finances for 1 second. I'm going to decide to sit down with intentionality, and I'm going to go and read the budgeting series on the website. And I'm going to begin to make a commitment to myself and, everybody else around me, as far as my family goes, we're going to rein our finances in. We didn't get to this point in a day. We're not going to get out of it in a day. But the principle of micro decisions, we're going to make some changes, and then over time, we're going to continue to make those changes, right? So maybe it does involve not stopping at the convenience store, but maybe it also includes not eating out. And I'm not trying to discourage anybody from doing these things. I'm just setting the example, if you will. Maybe I don't go out to eat then. Maybe instead what I do is we eat at home, make a conscious or micro decision that we continually exercise discipline day in and day out. And then in 6 months' time, next thing you know, you've got $2,000, $3,000 saved up for another purchase or whatever. And so not only are you making micro decisions, the principle of micro decisions in action in the financial realm, and not only are you making those decisions to not get coffee and all this stuff, but you're also building discipline, which I might add, most people lack. So to that end, those are just a couple of examples within the financial realm. The other thing that you could use this in the finances before we move on to, let's say, the personal, is debt. Now, I know that there are a whole host of people who could be listening to this right now. Indeed. And you might even be somebody who's young and fell victim to the lie that adults have perpetuated, that you've got to go to college to get a good job. And no adult has spoken truth into your life when it comes to this. And so now here you are on the other side of this, what I would say is probably a very bad decision that comes with an albatross around your neck or a shackle and chain that is debt. And many of you probably feel like you'll never get out of debt. It's possible. In fact, it's probably more than possible. For a lot of people, it's probably in the probable realm now. But the reality is that whether it's credit card debt or student loans or whatever, there are people who actually demonstrate and embody the principle of micro decisions to get themselves out of debt. And they narrow their focus, and they make a plan, and they make little micro changes in the way. They make a lot of them, don't get me wrong, but they make little micro changes throughout their life, their day-to-day operations, let's say on a daily, weekly, monthly cycle, if you will, to then turn around and in a year's time. I have seen stories where people pay off significant amounts of money because they don't like the feeling that comes with having, enormous amount or soul crushing almost debt. And so it's very illustrative then that people can use and should use, if you will, the principle of micro decisions in finances. It's most assuredly something that we should consider. The next area that we'll talk about is work. And this is something that happens and you don't even know it. You don't even pay any attention to. When it comes to the principle of micro decisions, for those of you who are, you don't have any time into this trade, you're just starting out, or whether you got 20 years in, you've seen the people who have embodied this principle, and it'll become more clear as I explain it. But you also know the people who have used it to the negative for their, and you'll understand that when I kind of expound upon this a little bit. When you look at somebody who has a solid reputation, somebody who is known as a go-getter, they're a worker. They just want to get the job done and they want to do it to the best of their ability. This did not happen by accident, nor did it happen at like a specific moment in time where we flipped a switch and it just transitioned over. No. This happened because somebody made intentional choices day in and day out to practice the principle of micro decisions to build that reputation up. And fast forward until they're in the trade or on a job or, in their career or whatever, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in, and everybody around them, they may not agree with them, but they respect them because they put their money where their mouth is and they've built up a reputation. And I might add, they're very valuable to not just the company or, wherever they happen to work at, but other people want them to come work for them too. See, they've taken that amount of time, and it isn't just a skill level thing. That's not the case. A lot of people think that it's a skill. You've got skill. You know what you're doing, and therefore I want you to come work for me. But the reality is this: if you could have all the skill you want, but if you have a bad reputation, you don't come into work as much as you should, you have a pretty negative attitude, your skill level does not matter, at least to me, and I know other people that doesn't. What matters is a good attitude and that reputation of demonstrating, getting to work on time. It isn't just one day. There isn't just one day where someone says, well, this guy, he's got a good reputation. No, it's the principle of micro decisions in action. Somebody's coming to work, they're making a conscious, intentional effort to be at work every single day early and to be there and make sure that they do exactly what they're supposed to do, doing what they're supposed to do. And they're always looking for opportunities to learn. That's another principle of micro decisions. You see, you can't just sit here and say to somebody that's young, like, for example, if you're an apprentice and you're listening to this, or you're new to the trade, if somebody tells you that after 4 years, you're going to know everything, they're telling you a lie. You yourself must embrace and embody the principle of micro decisions so that every single day you are looking to learn something new, if at all possible, and you're looking to hone your skills even more. And you start by day 1, day 10, 2 months in, 6 months in, 1 year's time, 4 years, you're done with an apprenticeship if that's the route that you're going, etc., etc. And it could be that you're 20 years in and you're still employing and using the principle of micro decisions. Now, up until this point, I've demonstrated, at least in the example realm, how the principle of micro decisions can be used to enact positive effectiveness. But what many people neglect, of course, they don't even understand it, is that it is also used, it's very amoral. It's also used in the negative sense. If you have somebody that routinely comes in late to work, for example, it isn't just one decision. It's not just one time that they're late. Even though they may say, hey, I was just late this one time. No, you've been late consistently. And so if, let's say, for example, you get dismissed from work, you get laid off or fired, and you're like, man, I was only a couple minutes late. You've been a couple minutes late for days upon days upon days. You've been consistent in employing the principle of micro decisions to the negative. And now it's negatively affecting you. And ultimately what happens when it comes to the principle of micro decisions is that most people that don't understand the way it works and then get caught up in those negative circumstances, they get angry, and their anger is misplaced because it should not be directed at the person who happens to be, the foreman or whatever that's dismissing you, or your boss, if you're in a white collar word, that's dismissing you. No, your anger needs to be on yourself, because you are the one who has consistently made those small micro decisions that have led you to this point today. And that is the point that I want to drive home for you as we begin to land this plane on this podcast episode, is that you will, whether you know it or not, you will use the principle of micro decisions every day. Every day. You will use the principle of micro decisions, whether you know it or will admit it or not. It will happen to you. you will begin to notice, if you look back through, at least up to this point, like let's say you're listening to this podcast now and you look back over your life. Do you have a positive reputation at work? Do you have a positive financial outlook? Do you have a positive family relations? Are you making specific and certain micro decisions that build up into habits? And those habits, of course, end up becoming who you are. And so are you cognizant? Are you thoughtful about your micro decisions? Or are you just simply making them? And you're looking back at your life and you've got a wake of destruction behind you. And we like to joke about this, right? I'm an iron worker. So I've been an iron worker for 23 years now. And it's telling to me that when I first got in, I was asked, did I have a DUI? Did I have a divorce? Did I have a felony? And to each one of those, I had to say no, because I still don't. And I was told, well, you're not going to make it. I mean, it was a jest. It was a joke. So, and my brother's a pipe fitter. My youngest brother's a high voltage lineman. And so when we start talking about the trades in general, that now I'm talking to you guys in the trades, there are perceptions. There are things that we like to joke about. But in reality, if you look back over the course of your life and you got a felony or you got a divorce or you've got a DUI or whatever, these are choices, deliberate choices that we made. And those are the big ticket items. The divorce, the DUI, the felonies, those are the big ticket items that we're talking about. What about the micro decisions that you made on a daily basis to build up habits that led you to those big ticket items? Most people, if they could go back and do things over again, they'd do them a lot differently. This is why I'm so excited about the podcast format anyway. It's because I'm able to take nuggets of wisdom that I know that other people poured into me when I was younger, so that I can turn around then and pour it into other people's lives. And it's out there for good. This isn't a one-off conversation out in the field or out on the job site where I just had that one interaction as a memory. No, this is real world life application help in a space that you can continually come back to and then also refer other people to it. So when we think about that from a trades perspective, surely there are a lot of things that we have going on. But I want to make sure and just let you know now that if you are listening and you understand the principle of micro decisions and you're intentional about it, you can use it to your benefit, to your great benefit. But if you look back, if you've got any amount of time in this trade and you have a DUI or a felony or, a divorce or whatever the case may be, you can probably look back and start to begin to think about all the little micro decisions that you made got you to this point or that point. And maybe you're heading in a certain negative direction. And hopefully this podcast episode, you begin to listen and you start to think, what are the little micro decisions that I am making that are leading me down a path that I should not be going down on? This is not the direction that I should be going. So, in a nutshell, the principle of micro decisions is real. The principle of micro decisions is useful. The principle is, it's amoral. It can be used for good or bad, and everybody uses it whether they know it or not. By the end of this podcast episode, hopefully you now not only know it, but will begin to intentionally use it. Be aware of it and use it to change the trajectory of your own life. And that, my friends, is the principle of micro decisions in a nutshell. Now the podcast down. I thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next podcast episode.